If you're about to pick up Astrologian for the first time in Dawntrail and find it a bit overwhelming to get started, then this video is for you. This guide will teach you how to play Astrologian at level 30 and then go on to explain how to use all of the actions you learned from level 30 to 50 in order, recommending ways to use actions as necessary. This also includes more general healing advice. In the summary, we'll cover a detailed attack rotation for use at level 50, as well as healing tips and advice that encompasses all of the things you learned throughout this guide. Now then, let's begin with your attacking spells. Malefic is your basic attacking spell, and it functions as your filler spell that you use when nothing more important, like healing, takes priority. Incorporating attacking in group combat is a core part of healing in Final Fantasy XIV, so it is better to practice finding time to do so as early as possible. Of course, it is more important to keep your group alive than being too greedy with damage. Combust is your damage over time spell, or DOT for short. You should make sure to keep this active on as many enemies as possible before resorting to Malefic. For healing, let's start with your spell options. Benefic 2 and Helios serve as your single target and area of effect, AoE for short, healing options. Generally, Helios is the better choice if more than 2 players need healing, but Benefic 2 is the best option for keeping your tank healthy. Benefic 1 serves as a slightly more MP efficient heal, but this should be entirely avoided in nearly all situations, as the greater potency of Benefic 2 allows you to more quickly get back to doing other things like attacking, which is the better choice. If you're closing in on running out of MP, Benefic 1 is a viable choice for that situation only. Ascend brings a dead player back to life. It is quite expensive and takes a long time to cast, so outside of desperate situations, you should only cast Ascend alongside Swift Cast, a roll action that makes your next spell with a cast time instant. This of course means you can only reliably raise someone once per minute. Note that when a player is resurrected, they are completely impervious to damage and effects applied by damage for 5 seconds. Unless they do anything other than movement. Using Sprint also removes this effect. Finally, Isuna is a roll action that removes a single removable debuff. You can identify a removable debuff by the bluish-white line above the debuff icon. Some debuffs are more important to remove than others. For instance, removing a slowing effect, whether it is movement or attack speed, is likely to assist your group more than spending that time casting Malefic. Paralyze is especially important to remove, as the random stuns from it can be lethal or especially problematic for mages, including yourself. Sometimes dots can be removed too, and sometimes they can be dangerous, and other times they are so weak that it isn't really worth the effort of removing them. You can only tell from the damage the affected player ends up taking, and then keeping it in mind for the future. For MP recovery, Lucid Dreaming recovers 3,850 every minute over 21 seconds, and I recommend that you use this whenever you are below 8,000 MP. If you are actively casting, then most of the value of Lucid Dreaming will still be applied. Lucid Dreaming should absolutely not be kept as a last resort reserve when you are already out of MP. Use it early and often, even if some of the MP it grants ends up going to waste. Now, let's talk about your other ability options. Essential Dignity, on a relatively short cooldown, allows you to heal for a very large amount of HP, which increases the less HP your target has left. This ability maximizes its potency when the target drops to 30% or less HP, so unless it is too dangerous, you should typically let your target drop to around this threshold before using Essential Dignity. In most situations, the target of Essential Dignity will be your tank. Remember to use Essential Dignity regularly, and don't save it as a panic button, as a huge amount of the value in the ability is in its short cooldown. Lightspeed reduces the cast time of all of your spells by 2.5 seconds, making most of them instant. It also reduces the cast time of Ascend to a point where, in a desperate situation, you could potentially cast Ascend without Swift Cast if you need to. Lightspeed allows you to keep up with your team while casting spells should you have the need to, although applying Combust to each enemy as you run with a tank tends to take up plenty of time. Notably, as Lightspeed only reduces cast time, it does not allow you to fit more spells in the same time frame, so if you aren't going anywhere, then the benefits of Lightspeed are probably not going to be very significant in those situations. Do keep in mind that Lightspeed has 2 charges, so if being able to move while casting is helpful, then feel free to use it. Next, let's take a look at Astrologian's card mechanic. First, you have the Arcana gauge, which shows what cards you have in hand. If you have any cards in this gauge and decide to draw more, you will lose these cards in the process. When initially entering a duty, you will be given the cards associated with the Astral draw, and your next draw will be an Umbral draw. After that point, the button will automatically alternate between Astral and Umbral draw. Astral draw grants you the Balance, the Arrow, and the Spire. Umbral draw grants you the Spear, the Bowl, and the Eva. Using either draw also recovers 20% of your max MP as a bonus. Optimally, you should use these draws exactly on cooldown when they become available, or at least close to. But at this level, aside from this, simply playing your cards as they seem helpful is good enough. The Balance and the Spear are used with the ability Play 1. They both increase the damage done by the target for a bit, with the Balance being twice as good for tanks and melee damage dealers, and the Spear being twice as good for healers, range damage dealers, and mages. This means that the Balance should be used on any melee damage dealer in your group, or lacking those, play it on the tank or any damage dealer. The Spear should be used on any ranged or mage in your group, or lacking those, a melee damage dealer. Preferably not yourself, unless the only other option is a tank for some reason. The Arrow increases healing received from everything by the target, and the Bowl reduces damage taken by the target. These cards are accessed with the ability Play 2. Both of these cards are typically well spent on the tank, but can be used on whoever seems to make sense. The Spire applies a shield to your target, and Eva applies a healing over time effect, HOT for short, that heals for a large amount over 15 seconds to the target. These cards are accessed with the ability Play 3. Conveniently, the Arrow's healing increase affects both of these, but notably, the barrier from the Spear will be larger. Similarly, the Bowl's damage reduction will more safely allow the target to receive the healing from the Eva over time, so these can often be used in pairs on the tank when you deem it time. A bonus tip is that the Astral draw, which contains the melee card, has a blue outline on the cards, and the Umbral draw, which contains the ranged card, has a purple outline. In regards to card playing, I want to briefly talk about weaving. In Final Fantasy XIV, spells incur a 2.5 second time frame where you cannot initiate another spell, regardless of the cast time. Abilities, like Essential Dignity, Draws, and Plays, do not do this, and furthermore are not impeded by this 2.5 second time frame either. However, abilities and even instant spells still cause an animation lock that prevents you from casting anything else for around half a second and then some. Weaving is the concept of weaving abilities between spells. Notably, spells with a cast time of 1.5 or less, which is most of your spells, you can fit one ability before the next spell. Instant spells like Combust allows you to fit 2 abilities if necessary. During Lightspeed, you can fit 2 abilities between most spells. This does however mean that outside of Lightspeed or Combust, the typical gameplay involves fitting Draw after one spell and then Play after a later spell, and so not both Draw and Play or something in the same window. Optimally, Essential Dignity should also be weaved this way, but sometimes damage can sneak up on you and you may need to drop everything you're doing to save the tank. The important part is to get used to weave, draw, play, and tools like Lightspeed and Lucid Dreaming as you fight. I have a video in the description that goes in more detail with this subject if you're interested. Finally, before moving on to new spells and abilities, Repose is a role action you can use to crowd control enemies. And comically, the damage over time of Combust does not break the effect. However, any other damage will break it, so you will probably not need this spell much. Now then, at level 34, you learn the spell Aspected Benefic, which instantly heals your target for a decent amount, and then applies a HOT to the target for 15 seconds. This is by far your strongest healing tool, so if your tank needs healing beyond Essential Dignity, they probably do, then this should be your first option, and you should always apply this if your target doesn't already have the HOT, before relying on tools like Benefic 2, if you can. Applying Aspected Benefic to the tank before they start pulling is also a good idea. Even if the initial heal goes to waste, the healing over time can greatly reduce the amount of healing you need to do later down the line. At level 36, you learn the trait Enhanced Benefic, which gives Benefic 1 a small chance of making your next Benefic 2 a guaranteed critical heal whenever you use Benefic 1. To put it bluntly, this trait is completely irrelevant and you should still only be using Benefic 1 if you genuinely have no other options. At level 40, you learn the spell Aspected Helios, which is effectively an AoE version of Aspected Benefic, although it has a cast time. If at least 2 players benefit from the full value of Aspected Helios, it is better than all of your other healing options. Additionally, the hot effects from Aspected Helios and Aspected Benefic stack, so you can use tricks like swift casting Aspected Helios to apply this as an additional heal over time as your tank is pulling, should you feel the need for this extra healing. However, this is rarely necessary. At level 44, you learn the role action and ability Shortcast. This ability makes you immune to most knockbacks and also makes you immune to interruption as a result of damage. What this means is that sometimes when you're hit with a particularly powerful attack, your spellcast is completely cancelled. This cannot happen when Shortcast is active. At level 45, you learn the spell Gravity, which does damage in an AoE around your target. If at least 2 targets are within range to be struck by gravity, it is better than Malefic. And if at least 5 targets are within range, it also beats Combust. This can make using Lightspeed while your tank is pulling a lot more lucrative, as it allows you to cast Gravity as you run. Just make sure to apply Combust to targets until you can actually land Gravity on 5 enemies at a time. At level 46, Combust permanently upgrades to Combust 2, increasing its damage. This means that Gravity now instead is equal to Combust 2 when it can hit at least 5 targets. At level 48, you learn the role action and ability Rescue. This only works in combat and only if you and your target are both in combat. Otherwise, you will either be incapable of using it or the game will report that you missed. Rescue will, after about a second delay, drag your target to the location you were in when you cast it. Knockback immunities like Surecast also makes players immune to Rescue. The delay before the action takes effect means that you may need to react early when you need to use it for it to be beneficial at all to your target. Remember that Rescue drags the target, so if there's something dangerous between you, this may also cause problems. At level 50, you learn the ability Sinistry, which applies a buff to your target that copies 40% of all the upfront healing from your single target healing spells. This means that it only works with Benefic 1, 2 and Aspected Benefic, and all other healing is ignored. The healing over time from Aspected Benefic is not counted. Sinistry can be used to allow you to heal 2 targets somewhat effectively simultaneously, but in any situation where you would wish to do that, simply using an AoE healing spell tends to be more effective anyway. This means that Sinistry serves as a way to boost your single target healing spells upfront healing by 40%, by using Sinistry on your tank, for example, and then using Benefic 2 on your tank to gain an additional 40% healing. Sinistry, overall, is considered an extremely niche ability and it is not unusual if you rarely use it. You also learn the ability Divination, which is simply a raid-wide damage buff, which you should make use of as much as possible. The presence of Divination means that it makes a lot more sense to play your damage boosting cards in quick succession. This means that when you draw, you hold the damage boosting card, Balance or Spear, but play the other cards as you like. Then, when Divination becomes available, you can use Lightspeed to open up space to play faster, and then use Divination, play the damage card on the appropriate player, draw again, and then play the other damage card on another appropriate player. Remember to continue attacking between card plays. While your card draws have a cooldown of 55 seconds, using these extra 5 seconds of freedom, you can make sure the draws align with Divination appropriately every time. Now, to round off, let's cover an actual boss fight opener example and rotation, followed by some healing advice. Remember, keeping your party alive is always more important than pushing damage, but being efficient with your time also matters. You can use Aspected Helios and Benefic to preemptively apply hot to your party as needed. Consider playing both of your defensive cards on the tank just before they start running up to the boss. As the tank runs up to the boss, cast Malefic and weave Lightspeed. then cast Combust and Weave Divination, and play your damage card on the appropriate player. Then cast Malefic followed by Draw, and weave the damage boosting card on the other appropriate player. After that, simply continue using Malefic and remember to reapply Combustion, drawing and playing cards as needed, and try to plan both damage boosting cards around when Divination comes up. This then leads to the more general advice. For attacking, replace Malefic with Gravity if there are 2 or more targets. Replace Combust with Gravity if there are at least 5 targets. For healing, remember to prioritize applying Aspected Benefic for large amounts of healing on your tank, or a single target. Aspected Helios is great for 2 or more targets. Make sure to make use of your defensive cards, as you only have about 1 minute to get them spent before new cards come in. Prioritizing them over other options is not a bad idea. Essential Dignity can be used aggressively to keep your tank alive, and this is most effectively done by intentionally slacking on healing to let your tank slowly drop low enough for Essential Dignity to maximize its value at 30% HP. Just Aspected Benefic and your defensive cards while doing this risky strategy is usually fine. Remember to use Lucid Dreaming often, and remember that Isuna can remove debuffs with a blue line over them. And keep in mind that Ascend should really only be used without Swiftcast in desperate situations. Situations where you will wipe if you don't. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Shadowbringers, the 6 cards had each their own unique effects just like they do now. The Balance increased damage done, Arrow reduced the global recast time and cast times, Spear increased critical hit chance, Spire recovered TP, a discontinued resource, Ewer recovered MP, and Bowl reduced damage taken, but by an astounding 20% compared to today's 10.